Hello, I'm Tony, and welcome to the Tony Shap Show.
Hello, everyone. Today I have our guest. His name is Grant with Unstack. I can't wait for him to share with you more about his business and some recent wins that he's had. With all that said, Grant, I wanted to welcome you to the Tony Shap Show.
Excited to be here, Tony.
Definitely. Let's dive right into it. Let's start off with the famous one word open. So what's the one word you could use to share with the audience right now? How are you feeling?
Energized. I'm feeling energized.
Beautiful. All right, let's go right into business. So tell us about Unstack. I would love to hear, your story, your why, how you got started, where you are, and where you're going. I know this could be, this could take 2 hours to explain, but at a high level, if you could share with us all that, that'd be great.
Yeah, 100%. So just at a high level, Unstack's sort of mission is to empower non-technical teams to build, measure, and scale their ideas, right? Um, I've been building digital businesses my entire career, and sort of seen the struggles that go into building up digital presence, scaling it up, getting customers, understanding what works, what doesn't, what you should be doing next. And really have realized that's a horizontal problem, whether you're like my previous company, we worked with influencers. So whether you're an influencer, whether you're a startup or an entrepreneur trying to build something, or whether you're a scale up, some of the biggest companies in the world are actually even using Unstack. So really horizontally today, everybody's trying to move as fast as they can to, build these ideas, really validate, be agile in the market. And the goal of Unstack really was to bring the idyllic platform that I would want if I was going out to start my next company. How could I build that and give that to everybody to do the things that they want to do and kind of achieve the visions that they have? So that's how we started the business. We started it about 2 years ago. It's really kind of a, by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs company. But what we've learned through that is that entrepreneurial thinking is really something that every company needs to embrace, regardless of your 200 or 2,000 employees.
That's awesome. And just like before we started recording, we were talking about what a small world it is. We both have a mutual friend, Luke from Friday.app. It was pretty cool. And also, with that said, when you talked about your story, kind of like right now, you just mentioned about it's something that you would want to use, kind of like how I started this podcast. We're also talking about, I kind of invented it for something rapid fire, something that I would listen to, and I do listen to, and it appeals to a lot of people too. So with Unstack, that's great that you created this platform and this tool for other entrepreneurs that's made by someone like yourself. That's awesome. So let's talk about a recent win. Can you share with us a recent win that you've had and what you learned from it, Grant?
Yeah, I think so we were talking about this before the podcast. Like obviously 2020 was a crazy year on so many fronts. We were fortunate enough to be able to close a seed round on December 1st. So through a crazy election and through Thanksgiving and the holidays and the pandemic, I think we're very grateful to have been able to do that. But I think what's also been a really great win is it's I think for us, knowing that we kind of have the longevity to really realize the bigger vision that we have as a company, that's obviously why people, they raise capital to accelerate and step on the gas. But I think that feeling of like, okay, now we've really got the ability to think bigger, think further out, and kind of know that we have a path to get there has been a really great win just to appreciate recently.
That's awesome. Has anything changed since you got the funding in terms of like biggest thing you've noticed that's changed the way you operate your business since then?
Good question. I mean, I think as a team, we're I think everybody tried to take a step back and sort of reset, come into 2021 with, longer term plan, longer term thinking. I think, sometimes when you're super early, it can be that like mad dash to get to the next checkpoint. So I think one of the first things we want to do is like take a step back, like really gut check the plan, like really think about that. So I would say like that's one thing. I think also just you get a little bit of a halo effect, and as you promote the business, announce around, right? We've been another, when we had a couple really large Fortune 100 companies that reached out and were like, hey, we have this use case, could you support it? So I think the credentialization that can sometimes come from putting a little bit of extra cash in the bank can also help you, sort of, I think, bring on some of those bigger names, onto the logo list.
That's awesome. So you shared with us a recent win. Can you share with us a recent not so win and what you learned from it?
Yeah. So one that comes to mind, which is pretty painful for us. So I don't know if you saw this in the news. I was on TechCrunch reported, I think like a week ago, that like Notion went down. I don't know if you're familiar with Notion, but they went down for like a day. Somebody had like created phishing content. And their DNS registrar flagged it and just like took them down. So like everybody on Notion just basically went down, no longer had access to the service. It's a company that's, I think they've raised like 50 plus million. They're becoming fairly ubiquitous. That actual same thing happened to us back in November, where somebody, tried to take Unstack, an Unstack account and like use it for a nefarious purpose. And so GoDaddy actually saw that and was like, hey, this looks like a bad domain, and they cut off the DNS. And so they actually like killed a bunch of our sites all at once. And so that was like a pretty interesting, tough, stressful learning experience for us, because as much as we're like a marketing platform, we're also, an infrastructure company in a lot of ways, right? Like we power now hundreds and going towards thousands of companies' websites and marketing infrastructure. So, that was an opportunity for us to like really take a step back and be like, okay, like what is our sort of like all of our strategies around supporting our customers at scale? Like what are we missing? What do we get right? And I mentioned Notion at the beginning of it because it's like, even when, even as a small company, you can feel like something's going wrong for you, or like, oh, how did we not see that? Well, then, fast forward a month later, and you see another like massive company with far more resources, have the same issue. So it's always like kind of interesting to put those in perspective.
Absolutely. That's huge. And you bounced right back from it. So because, you just create a solution and move forward, right?
Yeah, it's like that scene in what's the Matt Damon movie where he's stuck on Mars.
Oh, yeah.
Is it The Martian? Yeah. So at the end, he's like giving this like just this lecture, and he's like, like going to space is just like, you encounter a problem, and then you fix it and you get to work, and then you solve the next problem. And if you solve enough problems, you get to come home. And I feel like that's in a lot of ways what building a startup is about. You just like keep solving problems, stay at it, keep going, and eventually, you get to really build something special.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Can you share with us your number one tip that you could give to another founder? So a founder listening to this, they got something cool, their go-to-market strategies in play. They haven't raised a round yet, but what's the best? I mean, it could be anything. So whatever is close to you, Grant, what do you think is the number one tip that you could give as an entrepreneur to another fellow entrepreneur?
A couple things that come to mind, and this is going to be super general advice because everybody's got different problems they're trying to tackle. But I think broadly, right, like be patient and be resilient, right? I think those two ingredients are largely defining factors in getting to where you want to go, whether it's building a startup or doing anything else that's hard in life. And most of the good things are hard, unfortunately. So I would say that is like a broad context. But the other thing I think is important is surround yourself with people that you trust, that have maybe been through it, that can be a soundboard for you. I found that to be super helpful for me, just as a gut check, even like, hey, am I crazy? Am I thinking about this the right way? Like having a couple folks that are, whether they're mentors or they're other founders, that you can kind of talk to through those things. A lot of times people they've either gone through it or someone else is going through it right now. And I think having that as an outlet is really important. So those are probably the things that I think about, that I'm trying to, stay mindful of as we build Unstack as well.
Excellent. That was really powerful because a lot of founders, patience is the number one thing that, you might be on this great stride, right? And then if you don't have the patience, you can mess it all up. So that was really valuable. Thanks for sharing that with us. So I'm in payments, as you know. So I always, ask some of my audience and also our guests that we have on here, could your business survive if you could not accept credit cards?
So if you asked me this question a year ago, I might say no, because for us in particular, we do a lot with B2B. And so, that hasn't been as much of a need. However, today asking me this, I would say yes. And the reason is because we've just seen so many people invest aggressively into, going from traditional service provider to thinking more like digital services and like moving more of the experience in the checkout, the purchasing of those services. A lot of that has moved towards SaaS, even for for traditional services and B2B services. So we see a lot of people who come to Unstack and they're looking to quickly accept payments, essentially make the transaction as easy as possible for people, so that doesn't become like a sticking point. And obviously with COVID and things, being able to digitalize that, streamline it, I think it's become more essential in terms of being able to just move quickly and grow.
Okay. Here's a super random question for you too. How did you come up with the name Unstack?
So we actually originally, we launched super early, like in our prototype days, as Spark.app, which just as general advice, I would say, don't name your business Spark. It's like a very, very competitive word across pretty much every category out there. I think Adobe even has like a product called that. So we kind of knew as it got legs, like, hey, we need to think like, what's a name that kind of speaks to us, B, that we can go out and own. Obviously we own unstack.com, for example, and that we can like build on early, but also scale on. We can build $100 billion company on this domain. And so I don't know if you've ever gone through the process of like branding or coming up with a name for something. It's so hard. Like not only are a lot of names taken, but then a lot of like the domain names are taken, and it's like a whole thing. So we probably went through like, I don't know, a couple hundred names, and we just like, co-founder and I would just like veto off a bunch of names, and then we have sort of a subset, and then we'd be like, oh, none of those work because we can't get a domain, so we go back to the drawing board. So eventually we came around to Unstack, which my co-founder Steve came up with. And really the idea is just, we want to like unstack people out of these complicated marketing stacks that they've put together. I talked to somebody yesterday who's using, their company's using a headless CMS and a landing page tool, and they're using Segment, and they have HubSpot, and they have Salesforce, and they have like all these other like data products to understand what's working. It's like, it's incredibly complicated. And I don't know that that's going to go away, especially for mid-market and enterprise. But for us, we're really like, how do we help people kind of simplify that and have one home base where they can really build, measure, and scale? And so how do we unstack them, right? Like out of those decisions and into a platform that just works for them.
That's awesome. And the name, the way you describe the story, how you're literally helping people unstack. So, which is pretty cool. I love that. What's the question I should ask you, Grant, that I haven't asked you yet?
It's a good question. I think like, one of the things if I were in your shoes, or we have a podcast as well, and I think one of the things I'm always curious to learn from other entrepreneurs is like, what assumptions did you make that turned out to not be the case, and how then my goal in asking that question is trying to really like pattern match and understand like what that could mean for my business, or what assumptions might I be making, and I think I'll give you one example from my previous company, Grapevine. Very early on, we made this assumption that like to really win in our category in the influencer marketing space, we were one of the first in the space to really build a platform around influencer. And the assumption we made there was like, hey, follow the dollars, right? Like, let's build for advertisers. They have the money. Like, they're gonna, that's who we really want to go after. And like, the influencers are gonna go where the money is, so it doesn't really matter. Like, so early on, we kind of took that mentality. That was the assumption that we made. In reality, the outcome was that actually focusing on audience and community and building a super loyal community within the influencer category was incredibly valuable, because it was a way of actually building a moat and differentiating within a space that ultimately became more and more commoditized as more and more marketplaces came out, and brands would just kind of jump around and go all over. So we kind of got that assumption a little bit backwards. So I think it's always interesting, like for any entrepreneur, really gut checking some of those like assumptions you're making about your go-to-market, and like where your moats are, and like how you're thinking about that long-term. And I took that learning in Unstack. We focus a lot on, educating our customer. We have this amazing Slack community. Like, we're very like customer first, customer centric, content centric. So I think that's something that, when you get an assumption wrong, like try to carry the learning with you forever and apply it in new situations.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for that valuable lesson. And I'm glad you shared it with. I think it's going to have a huge breakthrough on some of the listeners. You never know, right? So that's great. So how could our listeners get a hold of, where could they go to find out more information about your company?
Yeah, so I mentioned this a minute ago, we're unstack.com. So definitely come check us out, especially if you're building a business. Reach out to us. I'm on Twitter. My handle's Deken. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Grant at unstack.com. So always looking to connect with entrepreneurs and see where we can be helpful.
Awesome. And let's sign it off with the one word close. So what would that be? What would that be for you right now?
Reflective. I always feel reflective after podcasts because you get to talk about all these things. We're like working so hard all the time and go, but then you have a great conversation like this and you're like, oh wow, like that's pretty insightful sort of learning that I had just like talking with Tony and like hearing some of these things. So
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm super grateful for you to come on here. I can't wait to have you back on here again. So Grant, thank you very much for your time. And we got a lot of great gems from you. So thanks again.
All right, Tony, thanks for having me.
And there you go. I hope you enjoyed it, and great to have you, and thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for the next episode. Till next time, onwards and upwards.